This is SPTV.
Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Serge Del Mar, and you are watching SPTV, where every single day of the week, we ask ourselves the same damn question. What in the literal hell is Scientology so afraid of? Leave it in the comments what you guys think that they are so afraid of. Leave it in the comments if you have any questions, and please subscribe, like this video so that we can continue advocating for the kids that are still stuck in those hotels, which does happen to be one of the things they are very, very, very afraid of, you guys, as you're going to see from today's video. In today's video, you're going to meet one of the OGs of whistleblowing, a family that I'm very familiar with by extension since I knew their mother, Leslie Woodcraft, really, really well. Leslie Woodcraft was Debbie Cook's coping officer. And you might be asking yourself, what in the literal hell would a so-called church that runs out of a hotel need a coping officer? What are they coping with? Well, that is a very good question to be asking yourself right now, you guys, because what Leslie Woodcraft was helping Debbie Cook Debbie Cook cope with, blah, blah, blah. I'm all tongue-tied now, you guys. What Leslie was coping for little Miss Debbie Cook was all manner of flaps. And what that means is anything that was a legal liability, potential legal liability. The cope officer is the deputy. These guys always have a senior and a junior, a commanding and a deputy. So in the case of these little girls that you're going to meet in this interview, their mother was basically one of Debbie Cook's cleaner uppers of flaps, cleaner uppers of legal liabilities, cleaner uppers of self-admitted felonies, because she was overseeing none other than Division 1, you guys, Division 1. And you might be asking yourself right about now, what in the literal hell would a church have a thing called Division 1? Well, hold on to your seat, you guys, because don't ask that question yet. Division 1 is in charge of this little part right here that actually we're going to circle it in red. Division 1 is in charge of, you guessed it, ethics, meaning that this mom, Leslie Woodcraft, was one of the biggest henchmen that Debbie Cook was utilizing in her hotel to squash legal liabilities coming to the surface. And as you understand that context, you're going to start really connecting the dots between what it is for a mother to, in this case, Leslie, rope her own kids inside. And you're going to understand the family dynamics, because this interview really is for the books. And shout out to Mark Bunker, reporter Mark Bunker, who literally, you guys, runs circles around every last other journalist that has purported to know anything about Scientology and cover anything about this subject. And shout out to Staci, that was working with Mark, who also puts every last so-called journalist out there to shreds when you see the intelligence, the grace, and the ability to hold space for the unthinkable. Now, never mind that these guys literally broke ground. This was before YouTube. This is before Aftermath. This was way before any of these things were going on. This is a family that came forward as a family and spoke truth to power when it was not convenient, when it was not glamorous in any way, shape, or form, when it was not anything other than going and literally screaming fact after fact after fact. And why that matters, you guys, is because this information, this testimony has been on the public record for God knows how long, literally. And the fact is that no matter how clear the victims have been about the facts, all that get told is that it sucks to be you. It sucks that you ended up at that hotel and we cannot do anything at all to help you because you deserved it, because you signed a contract and you were a minor and your parents agreed to it. So we're going to be pushing way back on that ridiculous BS narrative. The little girls you're about to see here did not deserve a shred of what was done to them. So take a look. Please go follow Mark Bunker. Show him some love, because as much as we eviscerate every last reporter that has not done a shred of due diligence, we will also be glad to point out when interviews are done and you can tell the people involved care. And you can tell the people involved are not trying to please some corporate bureaucracy protecting who in the hell knows. So it would be good for the media to start understanding, to start learning by example, that all it takes is that you give an F. That's all you need to do in order to do a good story. And it comes through very easily when you care and when you don't care. So thank you guys for joining, and let's get into this interview now.
Zoe Woodcraft grew up in Scientology. She recently sat down with her family and spoke with Staci Brooks.
We went to Florida when I was 2 years old to join the Sea Org, and I was raised in the nurseries in Florida from ages 2 to 4.
Do you remember that at all?
I can't remember that much, but I remember the cockroaches, actually. That's kind of my main memory of Florida was cockroaches.
Well, shout out to this little girl, because my memory of Florida is also cockroaches.
When you were that young?
Yeah, because there were a lot. And then I went to LA when my whole family moved. We all went to LA.
How old were you then?
I was 4 now. And I lived in something called the CEO, which was I think it was the Cadets or Children's Estates Org. And I just lived in dorms, basically. I mean, my mother and my father would come pick me up late at night and drop me off in the morning. It wasn't.
Didn't CEO stand for Cedars Estates Org?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we just called it CEO.
Cadet Estates Org.
It's like the younger children.
And we slept on like cots. Like, I think we had those same cots that you had.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just didn't have enough blankets, no matter how small they would cut them up into or buy them, or how cheaply they just didn't have enough. So we would lie there in cots in crowded rooms, and some of us would sleep there all night, and some of us would be picked up by our parents. And then when I was 6 years old, my mother had been promoted by this time up to higher management up in this secret location called Gold, up in like north of LA, I think.
That's in east of LA. It's in Gilman Hot
Oh,
Springs. near
okay.
Hemet.
Yeah. So my mom said, "How would you like to come with me?" And I said, "Okay." So I moved up there, and it was kind of like this top secret ranch. And my father had divorced my mother by this time, and I'd been told never to tell my father where this place was. Of course, I was so young, I didn't really remember how to get there.
So yeah, you guys, these people went around telling us that these were highly secret compounds with highly secret locations, and a lot of hoo-ha was made about nobody can know where the gold base is because the the address is confidential. So just to contextualize that this little girl is literally telling you what in the hell her mother was telling her. What kind of mother wants to hide from the father where they're taking the daughter if they're divorced? And how in the hell that was legal, it's still flabbergasting AF, to be honest.
And how old were you at this point?
6. And oh God, it was so regulated there.
Well, now, where were you? Were you out at the part that's called Happy Valley?
Yeah. That's like, I think that's like half an hour away from Gold.
And what was it called?
It was called the Int Ranch.
So this was the Int Ranch for the kids.
Yeah, for like upper management kids. And it was supposed to be like a place like we should be thankful for getting there, you know, because it was supposed.
So that was the Inn Ranch where Lara was also kept against her will, brought by her mother. And yeah, the whole pitch was that this was a superior place. Everything was all glossed over, like things were superior, things were better. The delusions of grandeur and the derangement gets worse the higher these people go. You guys, there's a direct correlation between the derangement and the cognitive dissonance and the narcissism, the level of narcissism and self-righteousness, and the self-entitlement that becomes completely degraded of any rationality, and in fact ends up like with these people becoming self-entitled degenerates, as you're going to see.
Supposed to be like one of the greatest places for kids on earth.
What was it really like?
Well, the rooms were better.
One of the best places place on earth for kids. That's what she just said, right? Well, Debbie Cook's pitch was welcome to Flag, the friendliest place on earth. I mean, these people can't stop pitching platitudes to continue to hide what in the hell they're all about and what in the hell they were all about doing. So the platitudes is nonstop. The best place for kids, the friendliest place on earth, and all of these things that are spoken over and over and over by the people that are committing the worst of the abuse.
They were renovated and painted. But it was like being raised in the military or worse. Like all our rooms were done in navy blue. The carpet, our beds, the curtains, and we had dressers. We weren't allowed to have anything on the dressers. So it was like kind of impersonal. Like where we lived was kept really impersonal. And cleanliness was so important that, like, I remember when I got there, I did how to make the bed course. And you drilled like having every sheet folded perfectly. Like, like the sailors did those fitted corners on their sheets like that.
This is you're 6 years old.
Yeah. We learned the names of
6 years old, you guys, it doesn't matter what age you are. These people view all kids as adults in small bodies. They will talk to them as if they are understanding their derangement. And that is kind of how they hook you, because they act like you're the stupid one if you're not following their logic, even though their logic makes no sense at all. But they're so obsessed and they become so pressed to get the adulation, the okay, and the approval of the people that are in their surrounding, that they depend on that approval in order to stay in that group, right? Because the whole thing becomes you're now part of this Sea Org, you're in this group. So it's very, very sick, as you will see what happens.
Sheets. And you had like the fitted sheet, and then you have like the top sheet, and then we had a blanket, and then we had the bedspread. The bedspread was like embroidered with the Sea Org symbol. And yeah, at the end of I had to make the bed course. You had to drill like making a perfect bed in under 5 minutes, and we had a bed inspections, and we had like an exact schedule that we had to follow, like exactly. And we weren't allowed to bring our shoes into the room. We weren't like into our dorm. We weren't allowed to bring food into the dorm. And I only got to see my dad every other weekend for a few hours because we would get something called CSP on Saturday morning.
And that's clean ship program.
Yeah.
That's when you're
And
supposed to do your
we're supposed to be doing
stuff.
our cleaning. So we would have to like figure out how to do that and see our parents. So my mom would come pick me up at night, and I would go spend the night at her place, her berthing, and we would like spend the morning together until like 11:30, and then she would have to drop me off in her car. And then, but on the other weekend when I went to see my dad, I would start driving with mom's friend, one of my mom's friends named Paul. We would start driving down to LA at like 4:00 in the morning. He would come wake me up. We'd go down 4:00 in the morning. I would get to my dad's place by like maybe 8 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would have to sleep normally a few more hours. Well, sometimes it depended. I tried to stay awake, and then I would have to leave again at 10:30. So it'd be like 2.5 hours because then we had to make the long drive back to the Int Ranch by 12:00. You know, every weekend I would spend like two and a half hours with him and Astra and maybe my brother.
Every weekend, or was it every
No,
other
every
weekend?
other. But every weekend I went to see him.
Well, there were a lot of gaps when I wouldn't see you for maybe
Yeah,
6
there
weeks
were.
because the guy Paul who was giving he was coming down to see
Like he
his
couldn't drive or
family,
something.
and then he would be doing something else, and then he couldn't come. And I remember like once 5 or 6 weeks passed, and he would call me to say, "I'm sorry, you're not going to see Zoe this week." And I'd say, "Well, wait a minute, this is the agreement. This is my kid, my 6-year-old kid. I want to see her." And he'd say, "I understand your frustration, but it's just not possible." And I just wouldn't know when I'd see her
nice
again.
just to drive me
He
down.
was,
Like, that
he
was
was trying to be nice about it. He was. He felt sorry for me, but I was like, when am I going to see my kid? You know.
Imagine this man, you guys, that was not a celebrity, didn't have the big celebrity status treatment, whatever, and he was made to feel that he had to get the permission of a random security guard, a random whoever, whatever, decides whether he gets to see his daughter or not, because she's being kept in a ranch 4 hours away from him. So when we contextualize the plight of these children, especially the ones that were at the cadet org where their parents are compromised AF, they just have no clue what in the literal hell anything is. Why they have to have a room with literally nothing, just with blue carpets and nothing personal. I mean, the depravity of the self-entitled people that were running these places cannot be underestimated. And as much as everyone wants to capitulate and cuddle and canoodle them and cradle them, because everyone is so afraid to insult someone that would put a child through this thing, and someone that would be alienating the actual parent away from the child. In what kind of country do we live where this has been allowed to just be a thing under the guise of following a so-called rhetoric of a convicted felon? Like, honestly, those are the facts. Those are the literal facts. So it'd be good to understand that from somebody out there that might have a brain cell in their head.
Yeah, so it was kind of like the starting of like always having to say goodbye to my dad. I mean, I remember that until it got to the point like every time I had to say goodbye to him, I'd be crying. Like not just in this, but like later in my life, I would say goodbye and it would just be so hard on me.
How much did you get to see your mom when you were at the Int Ranch?
Every other weekend.
But wasn't she there?
No,
She was at Gold.
yeah, and
Well,
she
but
never
I
came to
mean,
see me.
the Gold is only 20 minutes away from Happy Valley.
Yeah, but she was on a strict schedule too, and no parents ever came to see the kids during the week. That was like, what? That would
Not
be
part of the
weird.
schedule.
Yeah, not part of the schedule, not
So
part of the
who was
rules.
taking care of you then?
So we just had nannies. Actually, I was like the middle age group, and I was taken care of by like a 16, 17-year-old guy named Sterling Tompkins.
Foster Tompkins. Boy.
Yeah, so like we would wake up and we would have like half an hour to get ready, and then we would eat meals, and our table was completely regulated, table captain, a new steward each week, like a member of the table, and cleanup time. It was totally military, and then we'd have clean.
So Sterling Tompkins, a 16-year-old, is who was in charge of other kids. A literal kid that grew up in that ranch, you guys, is who these people were supposed to be getting looked after. I mean, it's like, what in the literal hell could this possibly be? I mean, this is just so ridiculous. And you see the clarity and the grace of this girl, like having been put through the unthinkable. I mean, it's just outrageous.
cleaning stations, and then we did have school, but
What's a cleaning?
a
What's
cleaning station that would be like, well, say there was around 100 kids there, so so we would just have like a cleaning job, like sweep this, mop this area, and
There you go, guys. And just like that, all the children become slaves, slave cleaners of their own premises. Because you really, really, really should be running a commercial building with kids that are cleaning it, because they don't even have an adult to go look after them. They're such a nuisance, you know? In the case of this woman, Leslie Woodruff, she just acted like her literal children were her nuisance and she couldn't care less. She was too busy and pressed, wanting to save a world by literally repudiating every last shred of any type of maternal responsibility over her own offspring. So when we talk about L. Ron Hubbard literally having turned our parents against themselves in the most unthinkable way, we couldn't be more understating it.
had to have it done in 20 minutes. And then we would go to school, and most of this, a lot, well, not, it varied. It would be from like 20% up to one point in my life, it was 90% of my schooling was religious studies and Scientology.
Well, where did you go to school?
At the ranch. We never left the ranch.
And just so you guys understand, when she says religious studies, let's just put into context what kind of religious studies she could have been referring to. Because for a child of this age, the religious studies was the children's communication course. Communication. And what in the hell do they teach children about communication in there? You might be asking yourselves, since it's a very religious situation. Well, glad you asked that question, because it's very important to know that the kids were sat like this, right, one in front of the other. This kid bullies this kid ad nauseum. No boundaries are off limits. They can yell, they can scream, they can say profanities, they can literally dehumanize, whatever. The only thing this child is told to do is don't react and don't feel any emotion. So for all of you religious scholars out there that would like to fill in the blank and see if you would also have anything remotely close to forcing a child to sit there and take it ad nauseum while supervised by adults. This is all done with, oh yeah, let's bring this. Well, in this case, probably just Sterling, the 16-year-old, is the one who's supervising or whatever. There's always someone that has to check the course room, you guys. They don't allow you to independently study anything. You have to be. So she said she was doing L. Ron Hubbard religious studies. Well, that's what it means. She was doing this course, or she was doing the course about you're too stupid if you don't understand something, is you haven't misunderstood and you're just dumb and you're just stupid and the study technology, blah, 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 clear these words, clear the other. And all you're clearing and all they're programming you is with ridiculous euphemisms that actually erode reality. Like 99.99% of the euphemisms, these people were so pressed that we learned, a la L. Ron Hubbard, study your word, study your thing, blah, 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 like so that they could actually have that Pavlovian control over us. So they could really dictate to us, you're going to be doing lower conditions. And just like that, with a phrase that literally means nothing, lower conditions isn't a thing. But trust me, the kids that grew up in that disgusting place know exactly what doing lower conditions is. It's a sadistic, disgusting intellectual abuse at a level that makes me want to vomit all over the screen as we speak. It's that unthinkable and disgusting that these kids will be locked up with a piece of paper figuring out why they are the enemy of the group, why they are the betrayers, the ones in treason, is what they would tell them. You're in treason. You're just committed treason. So it'd be very nice to know for all of the adults that really were all about doing these things to their kids. What in the literal hell were you thinking? And how far did you take it? Think about it.
Except once I left it to go to Gold, the one time I went to Gold for Sea Org Day, it's like a holiday sort of thing. And one time, well, besides the CSPs, that is, and then another time I went down to see my dad at Christmas time, and I was only supposed to stay one day, and I stayed about 7 days, which was way against the rules. I should not have done that.
How did that happen?
Because I was like, oh, I'm here and I'm kind of staying here. It was Christmas time, and I really want to stay with my family. But so yeah, we never left. We never got to go to the movies.
You never went into town at all?
No.
Never?
She wanted to stay with her family, and she should have been staying with her family. What in the literal hell was she not allowed to be staying with her family for? And again, her dad was not in it, but the mom was into it. She'd be dragging those girls with her, only to not care for them. Like she's so selfish, it's so unthinkable, but yet so predictable, given that she was one of Debbie Cook's proteges to cope with all manner of abominable, disgusting things that those two women had not a shred of authority to be doing.
I didn't even know there was a town there. I only found out recently there was a town nearby. Yeah, I stayed on this ranch, and it was my life.
It's not funny at all.
At one point, oh yeah, and so we would do schooling.
Yeah, it's not funny at all. I mean, it's like we sometimes have to laugh about how in the world is so dysfunctional at a level that you can just completely reject the idea that this lie is still happening.
And then we would do like outside work in the afternoon. Like most of the time it was weeding. Like like I said before, cleanliness was really important, and so was like all the gardens had to look perfect because that too was like we were so lucky to live there. We had to keep it perfect, and we should do our best because it humbled us to be there and be even at 6 years old. I was like,
6 years old, you should be so lucky. You're pulling weeds. Monique Yingling, start figuring out how else you can pitch this workers' paradise that you've been pitching out there for yourself. Since we have this testimony from this literal child that as a 6-year-old, you see how clear she is. You see how to the point she is. She's not confused, Monique. The one that is extremely confused, apparently, is you. Because apparently you think this is all just having a jolly old time, huh?
I was like, wow, I'm so privileged to be here. The first day I went there, I had lice, and I started crying because I felt like, oh, I've humiliated myself in this great place.
Lies, humiliate. I mean, seriously, you guys. I mean, it's just like,
That's really what my attitude about it was.
The children there regularly got lice. They couldn't do it. They kept trying to get the kids to get rid of it, but they couldn't. Kids would have the job of picking lice out of other kids'
Yeah.
hair.
the job of picking lice, Monique. Do you hear that? Do you hear that all the way in the back? Because add that to your email list. Why were the children having lice, and why was it their job to take it and pick it off of each other's hair? It'd be really nice to know, Monique, why in the hell that was happening.
And like they would get scabies and like bed bugs and things like that.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, and
But this is not child trafficking, you guys, right? This is just a religious experience in America, right? Right, IRS? Right, Commissioner from the IRS? Why don't you call up Monique Yingling and ask her what in the literal hell is going on in her establishments that she pitched as a 501c? Because that would be a very, very good question for the IRS employees as a whole to either be asking these people or figuring out what in the hell are you allowing these people to do? Because, this interview's been out there for years on the public record, literally decades.
like some diarrhea conditions at one point in Florida that was going around. And if one kid had the flu, they wouldn't really treat it properly. So he could have like the flu or a bad cough for a long time and it would spread to the other kids. So there was a lot of bad living conditions. And then there was a chairman of the board. He had a niece and a nephew, and his niece was my roommate.
Now, what
Shout out to Jenna Miscavige.
were their names?
Jenna Miscavige and Justin Miscavige.
So these are David Miscavige's niece and nephew?
Yeah. They're the son and daughter of Ronnie Miscavige.
Uh-huh.
And Jenna Miscavige tended to get more, like, she was my friend, but she would get like better things than the other kids, and the adults treated her with more respect. Like,
The adults treated Jenna Miscavige with more respect, you guys.
they didn't order her around meanly, like as much as they would the other kids.
They wouldn't order her around meanly as much as the other kids.
And Justin Miscavige, there was something about a half mile off from the major buildings of the Int Ranch. It was this house, and it was like a rather new house, and it was nicely done up. And whereas our rooms were all like monochromatic, I guess you would say, and they were done up really kind of severely.
Yeah.
This was like a nice house with which I had like a dance room in it with like mirrors and bars, and it had art paintings all over the place. And we were only allowed pictures of the Apollo ship and LRH in our rooms.
Can you imagine being the people that would literally put the photographs of convicted felon L. Ron Hubbard in the rooms all over the place? Photos of him on the ship where he literally had minors that he abducted and was child trafficking in his little ship. Imagine being the parent that sent your kids to rot in that ranch?
We couldn't. I mean, we weren't even allowed personal stuff on our dressers. But here it was all nicely done up, and there was pictures of all this different stuff, and there was a paint room and all this kind of art stuff.
And who lived there?
And the big boys, we called them the big boys. It was just the Miscavige and other boys his age. But there was no big girl's house. I mean, maybe they would make one when Jenna Miscavige grew old there. But yeah, so we just called it the big boy's house. And actually,
It's called preferential treatments from hell, you guys. And everyone in Scientology gets them, especially when they're so-called VIPs or connected to a VIP or whatever. Like, the treatment of people in Scientology all varies depending on where you are, who you are, how much they can get out of you, how important you're going to be to them. Everything is a calculated thing for them. So the kids of Nicole and Tom are treated with more gloves. Now, this is not to say you'll read Jenna Miscavige's book, and it is absolutely unthinkable. There's no, even though the ones that are perceived to be treated great, there is no great when everyone's being data mined ad nauseum. But even in the worst of the worst, there was still, a tiny little buffer that you would see with the people that had the so-called privilege, and and how they would discriminate against us and made us feel like we were just like, the lowest of the low. But whoever they thought was popular was definitely propped up.
later, one afternoon, a group of us at the Int Ranch were kind of rounded up, and we were sent there, and we kind of hid in that house for like an afternoon. And I asked, why were we there? I mean, I didn't mind being there because it was nice. And one of my friends told me there's a or I think actually the teacher like announced it to us like in there that there was a health inspector or children's inspector. I think it was a health inspector. He'd come to inspect the ranch, and there was too many children there legally until they finished renovating this other building there called the Big House. So they were hiding us away until they finished renovating that, and it was legal for all of us to be there.
Illegal for all of them to be there, being sent over to another building. So yet again, you guys, like, it's hard to give anyone that's been involved in funding this scheme a pass as a consenting adult, as you can see from this little girl's testimony, because even the ones that went to the best of ranches, that's the thing with this disgusting operation. The core of the disgustingness happens at the here, and then it just continues to infect every last end user. So really, honestly, like, what in the literal hell?
Another thing with the Big House, there was something called pig's birthing, which was, like I said, cleanliness was so important and image was so important that if someone had a dirty dorm for, I think it was like for more than a day, they got the title pig's birthing. It was all, you could also call the punishment pig's birthing. And, in different kinetics and different orgs, the punishment varies, but normally it's like you have to clean your room and do amends. Here, because they had like, it was a ranch and they could do all this kind of cool stuff, they had the kids sleep at night in the Big House, which was this 2-story old house with rats and insects, and it had just been abandoned for the longest time. It was really dangerous. We were told never to go in there. On normal days, we were told never go in there because you could trip, fall through some boards, get a nail stuck in your foot. So this girl I knew named Lindsay, who was probably a little older than me, she was like 9, and a dorm mate of hers had pigs birthing one day, and they were made to sleep in the Big House one day, and they ran out in the middle of the night screaming because some bats had terrified them. They'd walked around or something, or some bats flew by their face, and they freaked out and they ran screaming out of there. They weren't made to go back in, I guess. In fact, I even heard someone say, "Well, I guess they learned their lesson." Gosh. So yeah, that's how it was there.
Imagine being the Tampa Bay Times, you guys, and covering ad nauseum the hole that these executives, Debbie Cook, Marty Rathbun, were at. And imagine this interview already being in the public record. We're finding out here, pigs birthing, you guys. I mean, the fact that we're finding out that this was even spread into the cadet orgs. I mean, honestly, like what kind of adults would put a child and tell him that they are in pigs birthing and then send them to this house with rats? Honestly, like who does that? Pigs birthing is where Monique should be sleeping. Pigs birthing is what Marty Rathbun belongs full time every day, all day. Pigs birthing is where Davy and him should be cuddling and canoodling each other, for they were that great of a buddies with each other. Being joined by Debbie Cook, the biggest pig that was out there in Florida, roping minors left, right, and center, joined by her little friend, Angie Blankenship, who all together today can hold hands and go in a merry round and go, la, 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 we cashed the checks. Never mind that we were putting kids in a hole. I mean, literal kids are being put in pigs birthing with a disgusting house that has nails sticking out of it. Bats coming out. I mean, and it's been in the public record forever. So what? They're not doing it anymore? The pig's birthing has been made better? Perhaps Thomas C. Tobin wants to jump real quick on his computer and do some research and see if he GTSs something to stop pitching altered important stories and start completely ignoring what in the hell has been already there forever. That would be very good for them to be figuring the hell out.
We were like told that we should be like adults, and we were given jobs like if there was ever a fire, like I was in charge of a fire extinguisher in a certain area, and I would be the one putting out the fire instead of adults, because we didn't have a lot of adults there. There was like
You should be adults. I mean, you guys, ad nauseum, all the time. That's what we were told. You're just an adult. You're just an adult. Deal with it. You can do it. You can do it. Make it go right. Make it go right. Make it go right. That's how they would force the dysfunction on us. Any complaint, make it go right. Any complaint, you stop the backflash, make it go right. I mean, and these people were just like robots. We're parroting these things that made no sense, and we had to acquiesce every single time.
How old were you
7.
at that point?
I was probably around 7. I lived at the Int Ranch from ages 6 to 7.
And you were in
Nothing.
charge of putting out a fire
Yeah.
with a fire extinguisher?
Yeah, and if we came across a rattlesnake, if there was a security guard nearby, of course, we had adults. Some were like security guards to make sure no one came on to the ranch that
Security guards, you guys, come on.
wasn't supposed to, or no one left.
Where's the child trafficking laws in this country? We would love to hear where those laws are. And why has every last tooth of those laws been ripped out so that they are as ineffective as they possibly come?
Left that wasn't supposed to.
Were
but-
you guarded all the time?
Well, we were run out. Like I was watched by Sterling Tompkins all the time.
How old was he?
16, 17. But
A 16-year-old put to watch these kids all the time. Security guards rattling around. These kids have to kill rattlesnakes. Like, what in the literal hell? And don't forget, this is what Monique pitched as a worker's paradise. Quote from Monique Monique Yingling. I mean,
but
were there adults?
yeah, there were some. My teacher was an adult, but not a lot of others. Probably there was a governess, there was a laundress, There was at least one security guard. There was a guy in charge of the whole ranch, and
Yeah, leave it to these people to come up with names. Oh, the laundress, the governess. I mean, these people were glorified slaves, period, full stop. Like, what in the literal hell were these kids being told that they were the governess and laundress of anything?
maybe like one or two other people.
And this was for 100 kids?
Yeah, around 100. But we were told, like, if we came across a rattlesnake and there wasn't a security guard around, then to back up slowly. But if he was like in the way of something, then to chop off his head with a shovel. So we were supposed to kill rattlesnakes that we came across. In fact, we were told there was gold was giving out a reward of like $10 or $15. No, it was at one point it got to $20 for anyone turning in a rattlesnake tail. So we would try to. At one point, like I would kind of look for them, like, oh, I want $10, I want $15.
You guys, come on. I mean, literally, like, incentivizing the kids to go kill the rattlesnakes because that really makes sense, right, America? That's really freedom of religion, right, IRS? This is exactly the example where we mean freedom of religion, you guys. God forbid we insult this girl's mother who's nowhere to be found. I mean, God forbid we infringe on her ridiculous, disgusting, depraved, motherly behavior. Jesus Christ.
And some kids did. I probably would have not been brave enough to actually
Good.
kill one. Yeah, exactly. But some other kids did.
So how long were you at the Int Ranch? Till
Until I was almost 8. And then my mother had been on mission in New York at this time, and she said, "Do you want to come over here?" And I said, "Okay."
come to New York? with
Yeah,
her?
so I went to New York.
So there you go. This kid now is being moved across state lines. Is she in school? No. Is she moving across state lines? Yes. Is her mother with her? Sure. Now let's just find out exactly what her New York experience was like.
I lived there for 11 months. It was supposed to be like a visit, but I lived there for 11 months. I didn't go to school at all. My mom asked me at one point, she said, "Why don't you go to the public school?" But I had been taught that public school is a bad thing. That, like, psychiatrists were constantly dragging off kids to drug them. Like honestly, this is what I believe. Psychiatrists were like dragging kids off without the parents' permission to drug them and do weird things to them and cause them pain, and that you didn't really learn anything. And once you walked in there, people made fun of you. So she asked me once to go to public school, which some of the other kids in New York did. And I said, no, no. And she said, okay. And I don't know why she let me make the decision.
So what'd you do instead?
So I kind of hung around all day.
At the
I
York?
hung around in the offices, yeah. This was like in the middle of Manhattan. It wasn't a very nice area.
And this is, you were 8 years old.
Yeah. So I didn't really do anything. There was a guy called Eugene that was supposed to watch us like after 3 for when some of the kids got out of school. And he took us once to like Central Park, and I think he once took us to Empire State's Building, and we did have a little room, and he would help the kids that went to public school with their homework. But that's kind of what New York was like. It was like, oh, me and my mom had a nice room because she came from like top management to New York, which was a smaller org. So we were given like this nice room, and we slept in bunk beds. Like she was on the bottom and I was on the top.
And that was a nice room.
Yeah, that was a nice room. Like, oh my god. But the rest of the place, like other people had bad rooms, like no carpeting and smelly, and it was like an old New York apartment that. Oh, the bottom area where the public went was nice, and my mom's room was nice, and that's all I remember. That, renovated areas. Oh, my mom also got no time off during this. She would take me at the end of dinner sometimes out, like to go buy a slice of pizza just down the block, or go buy a comic book because I was a comic book collector then. But that was it. She didn't get any other time off.
So, I mean, what did you do all day?
Do
you remember?
I kind of like would hang around. Once Eugene or twice Eugene took us to this park down the street, and
But otherwise, what did you
I
do?
was bored. Oh, my mom at one point tried to have me do Scientology courses, something called the STCC, Success Through Communication.
There you go with the communication course and the 8-year-olds kids, you guys. Just so you understand yet again, the depravity of these parents, the no guardrails, the no common sense, all in plain view, shoving their kids to do what they were into. Extreme, horrible, disgusting drills that have no place being taught to children.
And that was boring. I didn't like it. Another course I had done before at the Int Ranch was called the BSM.
Basic study manual.
Yeah, basic study manual. And I had been only 6 when I did that, maybe 7. And that's kind of hard to understand when you're 6 or 7.
Yeah, it's basically a shorter version of the student hat, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's sort of a simplified version of a course to teach someone how to study.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, L. Ron Hubbard was very pressed to teach these people how to study because, again, the only reason he was gaining access to his end users is because he was flooding them with euphemisms that have no base in reality. And people were made so paranoid because, when you talk about misunderstood words, you guys, it cannot be literally trivialized. How this disgusting degenerate went around pretending that any confusion you had in your life, anything bad that happened, like misunderstoods were the plague. Literally, he sold this like level of dysfunction. If you only go by a word you don't understand, you're going to have a blank, and then you're going to yawn, and then you're going to want to destroy something, and then you're going to want to leave, and then you're not going to want to be there. And that's the price that he was paying, that he was pitching, basically, the fear, so that you would have to no, let me make sure I really understand this definition. What is it? Like, I need to understand it. So again, like the depraved agenda, and then to be pushing this onto kids, like the level of intellectual abuse just literally knows no bounds.
The Scientology way.
It strikes me though that it's not designed for study by like a 6 or 7-year-old.
No.
I would think it's designed for adults.
Adults take the basic
Yeah.
study
Yeah,
manual, not
they
6
do.
or 7-year-olds.
Not even.
So I read through it and had like 2 other girls I was supposed to study it with. And when I went to go take the test, I only got 30% on it. And I was really ashamed, but I didn't quite understand even what 30% of the test meant. So when I brought it down to my teacher, and she called it out in front of the whole class, I walked to my seat down like at the back of the classroom, and she said, "Well, Zoe, you better get started on your cram." My teacher's name was Yolanda Avila. And she
Shout
said,
out to
"Better
you,
get started on your
Yolanda."
cram." And I said, "Okay." And then she's like, "On second thought, you don't seem to understand any of this. You better just do the whole thing over." And all my classmates turned to me and gasped, and I was really humiliated. So my mom, at this point, I could see her health was declining.
Humiliating a child in front of the whole classroom, because at 6 years old, she got a 30% on L. Ron Hubbard's deranged, disgusting ideas, is really rich. So again, it's like the amount of entitlement and capitulation and cuddling and canoodling that every last shred of government of the United States has afforded these people under the guise that they're so-called allowing them a religious right to abuse children as nauseum. It's literally like, it's almost as if they went like, how many violations of the law do you want us to close our eyes on? Put them on a piece of paper and we will close our eyes. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Oh.
She got very little sleep, and she would always have these deep bags under her eyes here, and she started to wrinkle before her time from all the smoking and coffee she drank, and she wasn't eating properly, and she choked on her food easily.
She was really a raggedy, horrible woman, you guys, this Leslie Woodcroft. She just was like a walking stick of nerves. She was always, like she says, smoking and coughing, and she was always like in this sort of like paranoia, and she was always just like, yelling and screaming, but kind of in a nervous way. Like she wasn't like sadistic and smart as like other women that Debbie Cook used that were very much that type. Leslie wanted to be like them, but she was always like a mess, and a physical mess too. She just always looked horrible.
And she got tired really easily. Like the times we would go out, like to walk down to the pizza place, or on one CSP one Saturday morning, we went out shopping, and she got really irritated at me. She said she was all tired because I couldn't pick out which pair of pants I wanted. She got irritated, and she said, "Sorry, I'm just tired."
Mm-hmm.
So already I could see the strain that Sierra was having on her. But later, as I grew up, it kind of became one of my major concerns. I always thought, like, my mother's gonna die, my mother's gonna die, because she looked so bad. She was really skinny. She's like a 5'8" and 118 pounds.
That's very
She was a rail, you guys.
significant.
Yeah, so I started really worrying about my mother, like in New York, and I would continue to.
Unbelievable.
When I got back from New York, there was no more room for me at the Int Ranch. My space had been taken. There's always a waiting list for the Int Ranch, about 65 kids, almost as much people.
And shout out to the Int Ranch with a waiting list for children to literally not give an F about. Like, yeah, this place is so exclusive. We have a waiting list of kids that want to come here. I mean,
As there are at the Int Ranch.
So where do the kids go that can't get in?
Well, they're just waiting down in LA.
Doing what?
They're just waiting in the cadets there with the children there.
So the parents are up at Gold, and the kids are down in LA.
I think, yeah, I know of several cases of that.
So where'd you go then?
So then I was like in the worst living conditions I think I've ever lived in. Even worse than all this, I lived in something called the AB, the Anthony Building, which is on Fountain Avenue, Fountain Street in LA. Yeah.
yep, shout out
And
to
that's
LA.
just like 4 stories of crap. That's just, it's, okay, they tore out the kitchen to make room for adults that were living in dorms with the children there, like nannies. And there's like exposed pipes and no hot water and moldy tiles and stained mildewed carpet and what else? Oh, we had these metal bunk beds that we always banging our heads on, and they always had chipping paint.
Yeah, you guys. I mean, this is not like child trafficking conditions, right? This is just another day in this religious country, right? That's all this is, what we're hearing right here. Because what she's referring to here is exactly what we encountered at the hacienda. Remember how I told you that the RPF was disgusting, full of mold, the carpets, and now she just talked about the ripped kitchens. I just remember, of course, like in the hacienda, we had a kitchen and a big living room and a dining room, and then 2 rooms because they was all part of this, like, you know, single unit apartments or 2-bedroom apartments, you know, but it's people were living all over the apartment. It wasn't just like 2 rooms and somebody had a living room. Nobody was allowed to have a living room. And yeah, when they needed more space, well, just rip the kitchen out, leave the backs, like the pipes exposed. You're just coming here to sleep 7 hours, make it go right. Who cares? The conditions were unthinkable. And the fact is, the only evolution that ever happened was cosmetics at the most minor possible get away with level, but never for the interest of those kids that were being abused in these unthinkable, disgusting conditions. And again, we're talking, this is not a celebrity kid. She's just the child of another one of those. I mean, this is even a child of a so-called executive, you guys. I mean, supposedly she had it better. There's kids that even had it worse than her. I mean, she just talked about Jenna, who had it horrendous. And then she thinks that Jenna was maybe having it a little better, but she was just having it also horrendous. And then there's other kids that I'm sure can go and look at her and be like, yeah, but we had it like this because we were stuck at that AB building. And we never even went to the one that had a nice room with blue carpet and L. Ron Hubbard all over the place. I mean, what in the literal hell is happening with kids having been raised like that? And the fact that so many of them are either in the workforce as we speak or somewhere out there ended up as roadkill, or who the hell knows? Because we wouldn't know. It's not like the American press has been interviewing any of them. Like, it's not like you wouldn't even know that they existed as kids with this experience, right? Like, who do we know? Oh, yeah, Jenna Miscavige, that I think did get press when she did leave. Other than her, who have we known that is stuck in those hotels? And again, it's like, it's as if there weren't kids inside, as if they weren't relying, as if Debbie Cook couldn't have operated for 17 years if she had no child slaves. Literally, her hotel would have been paralyzed. She would have had not a way to continue to pull in $2 million of donations for services if she wasn't allowed to rely on us, the minors, to run her sham hotel. So, full circle moment, these people were relying on child slave labor. And unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever the hell you want to say, going back to Nicole Kidman, since, she left her kids to Marty Rathbun. But then all the kids that were in that ranch while Nicole was, arriving and doing her OT3 with flowers planted everywhere and everything so perfect for her. This is the experience that the children were having 20 minutes away to where Tom and Nicole were taking their services. So if the celebrities want to be at the top of this food chain because they are loving the type of services and the type of slavery around them that is being given to them, we are going to start questioning that depravity that apparently everyone is so worried about, asking why Elizabeth Moss, somebody that grew up in this as a child, somebody that gave us the Handmaid's Tale for all to watch. I mean, it's like, how stupid are we, honestly, with these people portraying these roles and then out of one side of their mouth talking as if they are aware that these things are a thing, and on the other side of their mouth saying like, yeah, but what's your problem? Like, we can do whatever. This is our right. L. Ron Hubbard's the shit. So really contextualize what in the hell is going on and how prevalent and how it's been decades since this information has been known. This has all been just a tiny GTS away. And notice that this interviewer, Staci, is not pressed to move on to something else because we already heard you enough and you're rambling. This girl could not be any clearer, could not be any more concise, could not be any more graceful and intelligent, because a lot of these kids didn't have a chance. You had to become an adult real quick. You had to become intelligent. Otherwise, the ones that didn't make it like that, you guys, they're no longer with us. And shout out to them because we're speaking out on their behalf. The ones that didn't make it. As much as Lisa McPherson also died and blah, blah, blah. Yes, Lisa McPherson, that's what Staci and Mark, originally got involved in this. But you know what? They didn't just stay on that story. When they saw a family that was torn apart and they saw the kids that were also firsthand witnesses of the dysfunction, they gave them a chance to actually tell what in the hell was going on. Now, why the Clearwater Police, the Tampa Bay Times, and everyone else out there with this level of credit, of clarity, can still want to pretend that they don't know or that these are just some sort of like allegations. I mean, it'd be really nice to know how in the hell any investigator out there comes to that conclusion after hearing this clear testimony, really, truly.
And it was like you take this really old apartment building that's all chipped and ruined, you tear out the kitchen, and you put in a couple metal bunk beds. I don't know where they got them from. You take a few old, weirdly painted dressers that are like half moldy in one part, or like drawers are missing. You shove them in there, and then you put some kids in. We didn't even have all the bedclothes we were supposed to have. Like some of us would have 2 sheets and maybe a pillow, and some of us would have a sheet and a blanket. And like I lived without a pillow for a long time, and for a long time I also didn't have a blanket.
Now, let me just make sure I understand this. Your mother was at Gold,
Mm-hmm.
and your dad was out of the Sea Org. So you couldn't live with your dad,
Yeah.
and you couldn't be up at Gold with your mom. So
Yeah.
now you're in this building in LA, and who's taking care of you?
Nannies.
Who were these people?
Well,
Random people, just like Lori DeVallo's court judge pointed out so clearly when he was sentencing her. You moved your children to be taken and looked after by randoms. And as much as they told us nannies, and you can see this kid is literally saying what she was pitched by people that included her own mother, who betrayed her own mother, who could have left her kid to be left alone and to be with the dad and to have a childhood. Why was that mother, Leslie Woodcraft, so pressed to ruin her own children's lives? Like, seriously, like, you guys really needed to have met that woman so you can start understanding the profile of the psychosis that was very, very present. The psychosis that created the clear and present danger, the very, very clear and present danger that we were being subjected to 24/7, 365 as kids, you guys. That's what is being called out. That is what is being exposed for the 10th billion time. It's not like it's already been said by these girls, the OGs of whistleblowing, that everyone has pretended they never spoke out, or what in the literal hell?
teachers like the same. Well, my teacher at first was called Nancy, and then I had another teacher called Kathleen.
Were these adults?
Yeah, they were adults. They were our nannies and our teachers, and they also like would live in the same rooms with us. Oh, also the dorms were really crowded. And
We were always being kept in crowded conditions, you guys. Like where we slept, these people could have cared less. We were bussed and paraded around like worse than animals. Like there was no respect, there was no grace, there was no dignity. We had not a shred of dignity. But it's like, keep pitching child slavery as a religious activity, America. We welcome you trying that pitch on us today. We are sick and tired of the fake AF pitch. We're not taking it. We are not the stupid ones. We are not the idiots anymore. We're not the children you can just gaslight by pretending that a convicted felon is an American bred god. By pretending that the very said convicted felon is allowed to write rhetoric that his sycophants can just go at it and ruin the lives of all these kids that have been on the record for decades, but yet we wouldn't even know their names if we're relying on this corporate media that could not give a shred of an F of what these kids is going on with them. The world's complicated. I guess we don't know. Laws are very complicated. Laws are toothless. Laws are toothless in this country. Laws have not been enforced when it ever has been anything to do with this convicted felon, L. Ron Hubbard. For some reason, this government has just not literally the balls to deal with the problem they created. And before anybody says this is so complex, all they had to do is this. Yo, David. No. But L. Ron Hubbard is my literal, he's just so wonderful. You have no idea how many people were about to help. David. No. But Monique Yingling says that if, as long as we pay her her retainer, she will whip out any type of document. David. No. No. Go run a real corporation if you want. Go run a news station if you want. Run it as a cult, data mine, whatever. Do whatever type of fraud you want. But don't do a 501c where you're going to be targeting anyone who is this, David, 21 and under. If they're 21 and under, leave them the hell alone. And how many of those do you have in there right now? And how many of those minors that graduated 21 but are still, due to the cognitive dissonance, due to the data anorexia of only being exposed to a diet of L1 Hubbard 365 that have no way of growing, that have their intellect stunted on purpose by y'all don't leave the hotel, don't study anything, don't look at anything, don't know anything. You belong to us. Like, what in the hell are any of you talking about? Literally, start typing emails, start writing letters to yourself, start explaining your depravities to yourself. See if you can pitch yourself what this is before you dare to reach out to any other of these minors that were affected and try to project on them that you were just such a victim and you had no idea. Well, you know what? How could you not have a shred of an idea if this has been out in the public record for decades? And you guys, it was a big flap when this happened at Debbie Cook's organization. You best believe we heard all about it. We best believe we heard Debbie Cook screaming at this girl's mother. I just remember the staff meeting. Debbie Cook was going off at Leslie because her daughters were blowing. Her, suppressive father was, trying to create problems. And, we're going to actually see her full story and then her sister's story and her dad's story, because we're going to contextualize what these families are being made to endure under the reign of terror from Debbie Cook and Ron Norton, who was right before Debbie Cook. Okay, so don't forget, this plague never ends. All of these people are replaceable. One captain gets replaced by another. One more degenerate than the other. If they're not at that level, boom, they get sent out of that post. Oh, you know what? You suck. You didn't do the job. Bye. They'll replace you faster than your head can spin. So the people that climb and force their way up and really want to be these big executives, you guys, there's only a certain type of deranged person that ends up in those positions. Literally, they have to prove themselves. And they don't think they just prove themselves once. They're to the test every day on a weekly basis. I mean, look at Debbie Cook. How many weeks did she prove she was Little Miss Sunshine perfect until things got bad for her? Then she didn't want to be there. So it's got to really be contextualized to what degree are these executives entitling themselves to have their way with all manner of kids that they purport to be able to do just whatever they want, sell their time, sell adults to be serviced by them, send them to whatever place. If they're in school and not in school, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. You're not getting in between making money for these executives that purport that they just, want to expand, L. Ron Hubbard's dominion of what? What are they exporting? Who are they helping? They're helping themselves, you guys. They're helping their ego power trip from hell. And it's like somebody has to call them out. They better stop being cuddled and canoodled as if they cannot take the facts. Like, they're going to have to wake up to the facts some way or another. Because the abominations that America has granted them this cloak of impunity, because the IRS thinks this is a great idea to recognize this as such. Well, they couldn't be more wrong. And this little girl has just taught us exactly what they're really all about.
We also had like 3-decker bunk beds and stuff like that to put in as much people as possible.
How many people would be in a room?
3.
It would be like a small area, like a small little room, and have like 4 or 5 girls living in there. And then
That's how I was in the RPF,
say
you
that was
guys.
the
We
bedroom,
were
and then
all
they had a
stuck in
living
an...
area, which we just thought was another room for beds, and that would have maybe like 8 people in there. And then there was a tiny little kitchen area that had been ripped out, and that's where the adult was supposed to sleep. The adult from my room was missing most of the time. I lived in room 101, and I don't know where she was. Her daughters lived in that room too with her, but I don't know where she
The
was.
parental
You were
alienation,
living
right there,
basically
you guys.
no
I
adult
mean,
supervision at all.
Yeah,
And how
when
old
we
were
slept
you?
there. This
parental alienation was not just a thing for Nicole, you guys. In the hotel that Marty Rathbun, David Miscavige, Debbie Cook, Angie Blankenship, Dave Pettit, John Landine, and the hotels that these people run, they're all about alienating kids from their parents. It becomes part of the amazing contract where Monique Yingling decides that with the power of your underage signature, the minute you go like this, legal right, 0. Okay, great. Now join the hotel. Go over there. Go sit over there. Never mind that before this legal rights are 0. You're so amazing. You're so great. You're going to help the world. You're just so blah. You're just so this. You're just so that. They up, pump up. Yay, you signed up. Oh my God, we're so hooray. We couldn't love you anymore. Okay, now go be a slave. What? Go be a slave. Stop complaining. Go be a slave. That's the programming. That's how these kids are being welcomed into these places. And can you imagine being Leslie Woodruff, that was the COPE officer of Debbie Cook, that had a front row seat of HCO ethics at flag, you guys. Fort Harrison, the Mecca. I mean, you will Google how many times Debbie Cook said that she had the Mecca. He's the Mecca and the Mecca. Like, she wouldn't take the word Mecca out of her mouth. Of technical perfection, she called it. Technical perfection. Everything was so perfect in her technical perfection Mecca. So perfect that children like this were just furniture to be used. And the minute they started creating a problem, get rid of them quickly. I just don't have time for this. Like, I'm a big executive. I'm Debbie Cook. Stop putting developed trafficked is what she would call it. Developed trafficked. How dare you put developed trafficked on my lines, you guys? This is what she called it. Dev T. If you presented a problem to that woman, the big executive that she was and all, she would scream and rip your head off for inconvenience her. How dare you inconvenience her? Don't you know who she is? The clown that you see over and over wearing her little military thing, yeah, that woman, you couldn't deaf T. You couldn't create a problem for her. She was extremely pressed to not be inconvenienced. So you can imagine when David puts her in a trash can, that really broke her heart, that little Debbie Cook. I mean, her heart was just broken in 10 million pieces when she was put in the trash, where she was put where she belonged all along, in a trash can. Given that she did traffic, just how many minors, Debbie? Start adding it up, like literally OW write up PL style. Just start writing down the names. Like, we don't even care if you remember what you did to that child or not. Just the name would be enough to even see if any kind of shred of humanity was left in your brain after L. Ron Hubbard had his way with you. Because let's not forget that you were also a child, but you were also a middle-aged woman in your 50s that was all about this, and you couldn't stop raving to Dan Harris about what a jolly old time you were having there and how everything was so perfect and nice there for you. Well, this couldn't contradict you anymore. And this girl's more credible than you. Like, literally, like, she runs circles around you, Debbie Cook, talking about, like, I would have signed that I stabbed babies and I liked it to just get out of being able to leave with my $100,000 check in hand. Cry us a river.
Those were like 9. We didn't have any more beds for girls to sleep in, so we had a girl named Beth Hart. She was my age. She slept on the floor on a cot, and she just started doing that. And I forgotten. My dad would pick me up every like few nights to his apartment because he would try to make it easier for me, and I felt special because of this. And this was one night when my dad was supposed to pick me up. And so I was going to my bed of blankets I'd made by the door because I didn't really want my dad to have to walk through. So I laid on this bed of blankets by the door normally, and I was walking to it, and I tripped over Beth's cot, and my knee landed on the other side, and it got cut really badly. I almost needed knee surgery for it. So I started crying, and they turned on all the lights, and I was holding my knee, and there was like blood everywhere. And so they brought in the first aid girl. The first aid girl was 8 years old. Her name was Shannon Linane. She was the first aid girl. So they didn't do any first aid. And then they got adults in, and they were holding me down. They wouldn't let me look at it, and it was just bleeding. And they wrapped a towel around it, which made my really hurt when they had to take it off at the hospital. But so they didn't want to have to pay for it because New York's very cheap. If you get hurt there, they're like, God, we have to pay for this, even though you're dedicating your whole life.
Again, guys, because this is a racketeering child trafficking conspiracy, the Sea Org made this whole big and dance. It's like, yeah, we don't want to pay for it. But it wasn't even just the money. It was that they didn't want any child anywhere near a mandated reporter. A child that comes in and has their knee exploding, almost needing knee surgery, raises red flags at hospitals. Well, guess where Debbie Cook didn't want any child to end up? You guessed it, hospitals. Hospitals were a big no-no unless they literally could get in more trouble for not having taken them to the hospital, a la Lisa McPherson. But they were always like, well, do we really need to go? Do we really need to do it? These people knew what they were doing. These people were premeditated in their abuse of minors at scale. They didn't want the minors to end there to cover their own you-know-what. So all the testimonies out there, all the kids that were been put through this are out there, but you wouldn't even know if you read the Tampa Bay Times. You literally could not be more clueless. All of Tampa Bay, all of Clearwater could not be more clueless about what happens in these hotels. Never mind that they're literally wrecking your entire city.
Spam. So they waited to somehow reach my dad, who was out of the Sea Org. So I waited like 40 minutes to an hour for my dad to come, even though I was bleeding badly.
So they wouldn't have to pay.
So they wouldn't have to pay. So my dad came, carried me down to the children's hospital, and I got it stitched up. And after that, I had to do what's called a PTS handling, because like PTS, I had an evil source directed towards me, like I explained earlier.
So you were a potential trouble source.
yeah,
You were PTS because you had had an accident.
yeah,
And the only reason a Scientologist or anyone has an accident is because they're a potential trouble source.
PTS,
Which
yeah,
means,
all accidents, which means you're someone to be looked down.
Can you imagine that the rhetoric of a convicted, indicted felon that has been pitched ad nauseum as whatever Monique says in her filings to the IRS commissioner, is being cited here. So when a literal child has to almost have knee surgery, bleeding all over the place, gushing, I mean, honestly, like, but yeah, they're PTS, just like Connor and Bella were PTS, right? Because the mother was not in Scientology. Well, guess who's not in the Sea Org? Is Bella's dad. So now, I mean, it's her dad is not in the Sea Org. So now they're going to be blaming it on her.
Upon.
which means you're connected to a suppressive person.
Yeah.
So now you have to go through a process of trying to find the suppressive person that you're connected to, right?
Yeah. So now I'm 9 years old and I'm getting auditing, which was church processes to handle this PTSD of mine. And
Did you understand what was
not
happening?
really. Oh, and I would get like touch assist where they touch your finger to your body like this and this to try to put you into communication with it, like spiritual communication, I guess.
I mean, you guys, yet again, like we go into like, as kids, these people would entitle themselves, would literally put it upon themselves to read a book from L. Ron Hubbard that said, go feel my finger ad nauseum. And these people would be like, yeah, I want to put you into communication with your body. So just lie down here and feel my finger. Thank you. Feel my finger. Thank you. Feel my finger. Thank you. They're like, literally, they're touching you everywhere. And it couldn't be more intrusive. It couldn't be more nauseating. It couldn't be more ineffective. It couldn't be more depraved. It couldn't be more degraded. It couldn't be more reductive. But you know what? IRS commissioner, hi, what's up? What's up from YouTube? All the YouTube community here would love to hear from y'all why this girl that has a bleeding, knee and all, that wasn't going to be taken to the hospital. I mean, thank God her dad came to the rescue. Thank God her dad was not working for Debbie Cook at those hotels, because otherwise she would have been out of luck. You know what? Just do more touch assists. I'm sure it'll get fixed by the touch. And by the way, if you're not saying that it's getting fixed by our touch, then you're going to have to do another hour of that. Just add another hour. Try it for another 4 hours. See if 5 hours later you feel better. But just do it and do it and do it. Even if you feel like horrible, even if you want to stop, the more you want to stop, the more they're going to do.
To make it heal.
To make it heal, yeah.
Did that work?
No. I actually got infected because I was living at the AB in these bad conditions and on crutches that it wasn't, I couldn't clean up properly. We didn't even have hot water in the bath.
You didn't even have any hot water at this place?
No. And sometimes the toilets wouldn't work. And as kids, we used to be taking baths together, like to save water. I think we did that. I don't know why, but we were told to. And we used to hate the cold water so much. We would have someone else help us take a bath. They would take the biggest container we could find, fill it with hot water from the sink. Sometimes the sink would give us hot water, and they would pour it over us in the bath, so we would have hot water. So eventually it became infected, and then so my dad took me to the hospital again for it, and he had me spend the week at his apartment. And then after that, my infection stopped because I had good living conditions at my dad's house. But
during this period, I'd been forced to leave the Sea organization because I didn't have a valid visa to be in the States. So then I was put on like a leave of absence, but I immediately started to run up attorney bills to try and get a visa handling. And then I was like working 2 jobs on church projects. They allowed me to work on church projects and they paid me. So I was working like till midnight, you know, and then I had to live in my own apartment, and then, you know, it was a condition that Zoe had to remain in the cadet org, so I wasn't putting her out too.
yeah, because I think you would have taken me out.
You know, all of my surplus money went to paying the attorney, paying the church back.
So how did you feel when you arrived to find your daughter?
I was furious that she was.
I mean, and again, right, guys? Like, he doesn't have a visa, but guess who's hooking it up? Guess who's hooking up a foreigner without a visa? I mean, as if it does even care if there's visas or not. Like, these people didn't care about anything other than their legal bottom line. If they could get away with it, they would do it. If they could circumvent the law, they would do it. I mean, what was the big liability? If Debbie Cook had everyone insulated and stuck in that hotel under these conditions, holding their own kids ransom for the parents. I mean, you see what happened with Nicole after they alienated her from her kids. You see what happens to this dad when they're alienating the daughter, and he's put in this unthinkable place. I mean, by the time this dad goes into the Sea Org, you guys, and these people have had their way with him, they become rag dolls for them. Because yet again, going back to, you know, the literal euphemisms, it's like, you know what? Just sort it out. Make it go right. Don't create dev tea for us. That's what a father like him would have been told, you guys. You are develop trafficked, which means you're developing traffic. And I mean, imagine the traffic. I mean, I didn't even think about that, but literally, like, these people are like, oh, you're developing traffic here. You're causing problems. You're not resolving this on your own. So go resolve it and come back with us with a solution. We don't want the problem. We're executives. We don't want the problem. So just so you see this other side of the coin about how a literal father, this was a father that was alienated. I mean, these people took the father, the mother. See, in this case, her mother was Tom Cruise and he was Nicole. Never mind that he was still like trying to come back for the daughters, and you're going to see what happens to them as a family.
Her leg was bleeding really badly, and yet from the children's hospital was about 10 minutes away from this organization, like a huge hospital in Los Angeles. And so, you know, I was like, what is the meaning of letting her be there bleeding, you know? And they're sort of like, oh, well, we thought it's best to get you here, you know, and we were using contact assists and doing tech. So anyway, I didn't bother to argue, and I took her to the children's hospital, and it was a serious injury.
And what he just said, guys, I didn't bother to argue. Like, these people would wear you down. They wouldn't listen to any rhyme or reason over everything. Everything is stupid. Everything is based on stupid policies. Everything is based on their ego, their narcissism, the command channels of whatever they are controlling in those hotels. Like, you know, you really have to kind of contextualize the culture of these executives, how they have the fangs on every single last parent. They have the fangs on every single last minion that is out there doing their bidding blindly because they're supposed to just follow orders. Whatever the senior said, I can't say no. So there is absolutely not a shred of autonomy, and it's all just a culture of abuse and disgusting derangement. But, everyone inside there is going around with these delusions of grandeur that they're so special, like a la Leslie Woodcraft, because she's like, I'm the cope officer. I'm so needed on the planet. Never mind that was she showing up for her daughters? No. Her daughters had you see how they're explaining what in the hell went on with them. And the mother is nowhere to be found. Her shame is nowhere. Literally, she couldn't care any less.
That they were worried about her knee, and she had to have like 2 levels of stitches. She had to have like deep muscle stitches. She was in the cadet org, and the promise was that they would take care of all medical bills.
Yeah.
But it cost me, I think, nearly $1,000 in medical bills for that one night. And then the financial policy is, once you've gone ahead and paid money,
That's it.
thank you.
Can't file
The
for a
wording is
purchase
in LRH's policy is, you say to the person who has paid money before getting approval, thank you for your contribution. Yeah. And so, with my kids, I'm not going to sit back and wait for them to develop medical complications when I've got money in the bank or credit cards.
But when you saw the conditions that Zoe was living in and the lack of care that she was getting, you must have wanted to take her out of those conditions.
I could see things go. I could see that promises that had been made to me regarding my children were completely broken. I could see that they were living in squalid conditions, losing their education, and yet, and so I would complain, but only go so far. And for my part, I would feel that I had been like a bad SEAL member. I had problems. I had debts.
So you were still a Scientologist.
Still a Scientologist.
And there you go, guys. The projection that every last shred of person put onto these parents to alienate them. And that's what we're going to get into in our next episode about Nicole Kidman, right? Because the psychology of the parental alienation has to be contextualized. So it's not an excuse that any child is abused, but there is a context of how each of these children were left, in unthinkable places, in unthinkable positions. And you can see that, this church, it doesn't matter where you go in Los Angeles, if you go to Florida, if you go to California, if you go anywhere, New York, there is no place where these people aren't up to something fishy. Why? Because they're following blindly the rhetoric of a convicted felon. So just take a look at that level of dysfunction for a second.
So you were still in the mindset of someone who feels that the Scientology policies must be adhered to.
Yeah, right. And then at the back of my mind, I knew of other cases where people had dropped out of Scientology or come into conflict with Scientology. And, the church was so powerful and so bureaucratic. And to my mind, it was just like going up against the government, or going up against a huge bureaucracy.
It was just overwhelming.
Yeah, you'll just be chewed up and spat out, and I already knew that one person seeing their children didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the forward progress of Scientology in clearing the planet. So, if one person had to be thrown on the sacrifice pile, so what? I knew that was the attitude.
But looking back on it now, from your perspective now, do you wish that you had gone to the authorities and done something about this?
I still can't really give you an answer to that, because I still, I knew that as a parent, I wanted to get my kids out of that. I especially after what transpired with Astra, I wanted to get them out. The way I chose to do it was to become, secretive, and I plotted and I schemed.
That was probably better.
You
might not have gotten
once
out
I got
if you had-
Astra out, then Astra and I, realized what was going on. We schemed and schemed and schemed to get Zoe out, and I honestly think, and eventually we broke through and we got her out.
You succeeded.
We succeeded, and I really think the other I think if I'd been confrontational and said, that's it, you know, I'm leaving, I'm taking my kids, I think I would have been a loser. I don't think I could have gone up against the church and the power.
So let's just also highlight for a second the difference between, somebody like Nicole and his dad, right? He was not in the country legally, you guys. He was actually working for Scientology. So they already had him compromised. He was financially dependent on them. Okay. And, shout out to you, Homeland Security. Isn't that what you called human trafficking, even of adults? Is that what you call it, or no? Are those just like the toothless laws that nobody gives an F about? Asking for this friend right here, And shout out to Staci, you guys. I mean, do you see the grace, the intelligence, the care, the lack of wanting to find some salacious BS soundbite to pitch and to sell and to be like, we're done here. Shut the hell up. We're done. No, she's asking tough questions. Tough questions. Like, how did you feel? Like, we're hearing from a father who I respect. Where are the rest of the parents taking questions like this? Where are they? Where in the hell is any parent going and being asked this and being so transparent and so graceful, and he screwed up. Yes, he screwed up. People make mistakes. Yes, they make mistakes. There's context to how our parents got scammed. Sure, there is. And everything's getting contextualized here. So for all Scientology parents, once this video reaches you, look at what this father is having to answer, and then go to the mirror and ask yourself, is this questions that I should be asking myself? Even in your solo audits, if you're high up at the level, whatever, like, pull your withholds. Pull the real ones. Stop infantilizing yourself. Stop treating yourself as some deluded child that doesn't know a thing. You're putting your children in danger, and all because you've given Marty Rathbun, Debbie Cook, John Landine, Dave Pettit, Lori Engelhardt, Angie Blankenship, and every last middle-aged executive that was literally putting these ops together of these parents and these handlings and all of this dysfunction, you guys, that is so highly illegal, but yet we just keep getting told that's the way it is. And in the case of this interview, I guess it was so long ago, so you know what, we've moved on. But the problem is that it didn't stop with this family, you guys. The virus proliferates, continues, is being allowed to breathe. Oxygen is being poured. Right or wrong, why are they still kids in those hotels, Tampa Bay Times? Why are they still kids in those hotels, Clearwater Police? Why are they still kids in those hotels, New York Times? Since she even hit your state. Why are they still kids in this? Literally in all these buildings, you can find them. If they qualify, wink, wink. Oh, you qualify. Guess what? You just filled out your thing. Nobody's going to miss you. No. You have no one in your family working for law enforcement? No. Oh, good. You're going to qualify. You have no debts. Great. You really do qualify. Your family's all in. No one's going to miss you in the outside world. Well, aren't you so lucky to qualify? Okay, great. You know what? Welcome aboard. You're going to have a jolly old time. Now go over there and be a slave and shut the hell up.
You think they would have arranged to get the children back?
Yeah, they would have arranged to get the children back. I would have been dragged through the mire. At the same time, I didn't have unlimited money. I had to support myself. I had to work.
You didn't have the money for
I didn't really have the money.
Unthinkable.
No, I didn't. So I didn't even have a visa to be in the States, let alone get an attorney. So I felt in a weak position. So I thought the only way I can succeed is by scheming, and appearing to be a Scientologist, I just became devious. You know, that's that probably is the only way it could have gone down.
And he wasn't devious, you guys. He was doing what any father should do for their kids if they're in that level of unthinkable condition, scheming, figuring out, how am I going to overcome this? How am I going to defeat this? How am I going to get these kids that I brought to the world out of the goddamn hotels, right? Like, shout out to him for showing the way to any last shred of Scientology parent out there that wants to decide, you know what, it'd just be too inconvenient for us to leave, because you know what, it would be just so bad that, you know, people are just going to be like, no, that's not an answer. That's not a solution. That's not an excuse. You're not just going to be allowed to have children. Get yourself in this level of a pickle, of a legal pickle. I mean, today, be advised, find this video, go visit with an attorney. These people are being sued left, right, and center because it isn't okay what in the hell they're doing, period, full stop. So the more people stop pretending that they cannot do anything about it. I mean, when he was at that time, you guys, I mean, turn back the clock to when he was there. There was no movement on the outside helping these people leave, other than people like Staci and Mark Bunker that have been on this path to help people for literally decades. And they were doing the right thing. And even they got muzzled and silenced and shut down in the end. When Florida had the ability to shut this down for Lisa McPherson, they decided to play dumb yet again. Why, Florida? Why, Clearwater? Why, courts of Florida and Tampa? Why are you allowing these hotels to operate with impunity? Go ask yourselves in the mirror why in the hell that is going on, and then call your police chief and be like, are you aware that there are minors in that hotel? Yes or no? In the last 50 years of the Clearwater Police history being around, since these people set foot, has there ever been any suspicious activity? Has there ever been any minors found at the beach running around in the middle of the night? Were child services called? How many calls are out there? How many reports have been turned in to the Clearwater Police? Because you know what? That Clearwater Police chief would be like, this is the number. Here, this is what we have. We haven't seen anything. No, everything is going great here. We just, you know, we wouldn't know anything about it. I mean, we even do security. We even protect these child abusers for the measly price of how many dollars an hour are you sleeping with the corrupt people that, again, I guess you cannot even smell with a 10-inch pole. It's really ridiculous.
Down.
And you didn't even know how bad things were for your two kids anyway until they got out and started really telling you, did you?
You know, the day Astra told me she'd felt suicidal. You know, how can you be a parent and your kid tells you, oh, at one point I was thinking about suicide?
Yeah, you guys, and that's deep AF. And you know, 24/7, 365 of these people having their way with you, you end up in that state of mind. You went out, you can't stand it anymore, you cannot put up with it anymore. And the more you try to feel the feelings that come from that horrific, disgusting abuse, the more you're told that there's something wrong with you. And what in the hell are you talking about? So for parents, heed this man's advice. Have that conversation with your kids. And if your kids are ending up wanting to literally off their you know what life, maybe it's time to really start reconsidering all the choices you have made ever since you were pitched that L. Ron Hubbard was there to save your day and get you to whatever bridge step you've been telling yourself you got to when you followed his advice blindly. So take a look at that for yourselves.
And you think, oh my God, I've failed as a parent. I didn't know what was going. I knew bad things were happening. I didn't know it was this bad, you know. And there's like a sense of relief that they got through that. You know, what else can I say?
Yeah, I understand.
Well, also, we were the whole time when Dad was seeing these conditions, I would never let him see the full amount. Like I said, I wouldn't let him walk through the whole dorm. And when he asked me about stuff, I'd say, like, you know, I was still protecting the image of the Sea Org, and I would say, oh, you know, I'm fine, it's fun, you know, I'm doing good, when I really wasn't.
Now, why were you protecting it from your dad?
Because
Were you being told?
you were kind of told, and it's expected of you. I don't know how to describe it, but the way I was raised was so pro Scientology that it was all I could do to, you know, I had to do it. I felt it was as necessary as brushing my teeth. You know.
It was as necessary as brushing her teeth, protecting the image of these absolute degenerates that were abusing her at that degree, you guys. And that rings true to all of us that were being treated like that. They called it PR. You got to keep the PR. Don't go out PR. Don't tell your parents this because that's out PR. And, you know, some of us didn't have caring parents on the outside. My parents they weren't trying to save me. They weren't trying to be there for me. They did their bare minimum. They did show up out of guilt here and there. I'll give them that much. But it was all just a fake facade. They were definitely not plotting or figuring out how to get out, because you can see the face of this guy where he realizes what in the literal hell he did with his kids, and he didn't know, and all of this and that. But you know what? He's got remorse. He feels it. So that is what you call dealing with consequences as an adult. It behooves all adults to look at their adult actions and stop pretending that you as an adult cannot be called out literally by your own kids, even if it means by your own kids that you get called out for what you did, because, you know, it's not like the Tampa Bay Times is pressed to call a single parent out whatsoever. And it's not like they would have to, right? Because reporter Mark Bunker and Staci over here have shown us that you have to give people grace in order for them to have an off ramp to all of that dysfunction. You got to allow them breathe, you know, room to breathe, so that they can repudiate all that stuff that was sold to them that was a complete disgusting bag of goods, that only people like David, only people like Marty, only people like literally Debbie Cook thought it was a great idea, and they were having a great time doing whatever it is that they keep saying they were doing in there. Everything but child trafficking kids at scale and alienating them from their parents. They put their fangs on the child. They put their fangs on the parent. They completely pinned everyone against everybody. I mean, who's data mining all the information? This little girl is telling us she owed Scientology her loyalty. She didn't want to say to her dad what in the hell was going on. And again, like once you got older and you were under Debbie Cook, it wasn't just an option that you would even consider. You were chastised. You were written up by your own parents that you're complaining about something, and that's simply not allowed. You're supposed to always say everything they're doing is amazing and you love it, and aren't you just having a great time?
You know, or eating food. It was such a habit. If anyone ever said anything at the church, it would come out of my mouth. You know, defense again for it. just come out of my mouth without me even thinking of it. I mean, what? Okay, what if I met a person on the street and he said, "Oh, you're a Scientologist." I said, "Yeah," and then he started saying something bad about it. I would say, it's great. Other people don't understand it, but it's really great. And I didn't have to think about it anymore because I had done it so many times. So.
Even
we all end up there. Oh yeah, it's great. You don't understand it. Like, you weren't groomed in L. Ron Hubbard's grooming salons, so you wouldn't get it. You haven't gotten a session in any of those deranged extreme role plays, so you wouldn't get it, is what we thought when anyone on the outside tried to question what in the hell these people were having us do, and for what purpose, and for who to make what money, and for who to write off what type of taxes. That went right over our head, literally.
even though the conditions you were living in were really, really bad,
Yeah.
and you were aware that they were you aware that the conditions you were in were bad conditions? Were you unhappy about the conditions you were in, or?
No. I was like, I was raised in it, so I was so used to it.
But for example, you'd go to your dad's where you could have a hot bath,
Yeah, yeah,
and you had a bed with a pillow
yeah.
and a blanket and a sheet. Did it ever? And you could have good food.
The difference between the two worlds wouldn't really come upon me until later, because after I lived at the AB a while, and I'd gone to school there for a while, my mom called up. Oh, see, this whole time that I've been living at the AB, right when we got back from New York, she went on another mission to Mexico.
Oh,
So I didn't see her that whole time anyway. It was just my dad. But then, right after she came back from Mexico, quickly, she went to Florida. Back to Florida, where we had first come from originally.
and left you in LA.
Yeah, of course. It was a mission. And then she called me and she said, "How about a visit?" And I said, "Okay." So I went out to see her, and she kind of put me immediately into the cadet org. So I kind of knew it was permanent. Like, the first night I slept on the floor next to my mom's bed. And then
No, this was in Florida at Flag.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So here we go again with the child trafficking across state lines. This girl already told us that she went from LA to New York, back to LA, now to Florida, not to be educated, not to be looked after, not to be nothing, just to be shoved in a place that, I kid you not, you guys. I mean, all of you who say, "Serge, why do you call them hotels? Why are you calling them hotels, Serge?" Well, this is where this little girl was taken. Okay? This is where she went. These are the facilities where her mother took her to. Quality Inn, you know those hotels called Quality Inn? Well, these clowns owned a Quality Inn, and they turned it into a child's birthing, a child's literal trafficking hub. Go to the Quality Inn, stay at the QI, be at the QI with the rest of the kids. Everything's normal because we all do it, because we're all about it, because L. Ron Hubbard told us to, because, the IRS has recognized that we can do whatever in the hell and it doesn't even matter. Nothing will have consequences. Legal consequences are literally like this. What is legal? Legal for us, we own these hotels. We run these hotels. So she was just trafficked to Florida to Debbie Cook's hotel. That's where we are right now. Third state that this child has literally gone on the record decades ago telling her she was being moved, boom, 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 everywhere, without school, without nothing.
So the first night I slept next to the floor, on the floor next to her.
Sleeping on the
And then
floor,
second
sleeping
night
on
we had dinner
nothing,
at the same house,
cockroaches
and then she
everywhere. I
just went
mean,
to drop me off at the QI. And I begged her not to leave me. I was like, no, no, don't leave me. And I was really upset.
Now the QI is the Quality Inn.
Oh yeah, the Quality Inn that we had lived in originally first.
And now she's dropping you off with
Yeah.
who?
I had another dorm.
And so she's
with
not
more
living there.
nannies. Yeah, she's not. She's living like half an hour away.
That's right, you guys. The Quality Inn and the Hacienda were like 30 minutes away from each other. So her mother roped her in, grabbed her out of LA, where she at least had her dad that would come and see her. And now she finds herself here.
I would only see her at the weekends again, except this time I had a job that brought me near her in the afternoons. But I said, no, don't drop me off. I said, don't leave me. Stay another 10 minutes. Stay another 5 minutes. Something. And, oh, another situation like this happened in the ranch. After she had dropped me off from my 7-day Christmas visit with my dad, she left me at the ranch alone. For some reason, the kids on that day were with their parents that night. And there was no one at the whole Int Ranch. There was no one.
You were there alone?
We didn't even see a security guard. There was no children. And no one, for some reason, that day, there was no one there. And she started putting me in bed. I said, Mom, you can't leave me here. There's no one here. And she said, yeah. And I said, no, you can't. And it was like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh my God, you never told me this.
I know. I sometimes I forget these
What was
things.
she thinking?
I don't
Zoe,
know.
what was she
I don't
thinking?
know, because that's like a ranch and there's like coyotes and rattlesnakes. But I wouldn't go outside, obviously. I was in
She
my
was going to
room.
leave you and drive away.
So she did. She did leave me.
Oh my God.
So I was left there, and I couldn't fall asleep the whole night.
That's like a criminal offense, child endangerment.
I know. I didn't even see a
And
security guard.
You were how old then?
7.
7 years old,
What
you
happened
guys.
when somebody came back and found you there
So they
alone?
just eventually, I guess I went to bed for like 40 minutes, and I woke up in the morning, and there were some kids just coming back with their stuff and said, "You're here. Where have you been for the last 7 days?"
Did anybody ever?
No. I was just like, "Oh, my mom just dropped me here."
So you left out in the middle of the desert?
Yeah.
At the age of 7,
Happy
completely
Valley
alone.
is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely in the middle of nowhere.
So, but
what if
yeah,
there'd been an earthquake? Like,
but so this kind of reminded me of that situation. So yeah, she just said adios and left me there. So I was there in
Adios.
Florida in this new dorm I had, and actually, like I said, there's like such a structure and system there that because my mom had been, like I said, top management, so they moved another kid onto the mattress on the floor. This was like a nicer room, obviously, because I was an Int management kid. So I actually took her place. I didn't know it, but they had made that girl move out from her bed and her dresser and put her on a mattress on the floor in that same room. I mean, she was resentful of me for months, and I never knew why. And finally, she told me. I was like, "Wow, they moved you off your bed." But so this first night, I was lying there, and I kind of tell that my mom was just gonna have me live in the Confederate flag. I just gotten there for a visit, and now I was just gonna live there.
And how old were you now?
9, 10. I'm not exactly sure either, 9 or 10. That first night, I got so upset. It was one of the worst nights of my life, and I was missing everything in LA and missing my father and my sister. And I just went and I threw up that whole dinner we had at the steakhouse. And everyone was asking me if I was okay. And I said, yeah, I'm just missing everyone a little bit. But inside, I was missing everyone a whole bunch, so much that I was sick with it.
And why weren't you telling anybody?
Because that's kind of like, that's just kind of built into you, that you never tell anyone how bad Scientology is. You always tell them how good everything is. And you always sort of say your life is growing well and everything's great when it's not.
But even these are fellow Scientologists. These are fellow Sea Org members. You didn't feel you could even talk to them?
Well, because if you're not happy, it's your fault. If you're not doing well, it's your fault. If you live in bad living conditions because someone moved you in there, it's your fault for not going and finding and hunting down better living conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't understand that then, but later in reading LOH policy, everything is your fault. So I guess I kind of understood that even then.
Imagine an unindicted felon in the United States, a convicted felon in France, telling all kids that whatever in the hell is their problem and that they should never complain about anything in Scientology.
You moved to Florida in like 1984.
1994.
I think I just got.
So there you go, guys. This is part 1 of Growing Up in Scientology by Mark Bunker and Staci, who have literally shown every single last shred of reporter, press outlet, or whatever has been purporting to cover Scientology that they had already done the job literally decades ago. They had already put the pieces of the puzzle together. First, because they found out Lisa McPherson was murdered. Then, because they found out more people were being abused in unthinkable ways. Entire families were being torn apart. Why does every last shred of family that get involved with these people has their family torn apart? Because their kids are told that they cannot complain and they have to capitulate to their parents' stupidity and bad adult choices. And those adults get put in unthinkable places as parents. Nicole Kidman, this father here, every last parent is petrified of the consequences of what these people are holding against them. It could be their visa. It could be crimes that they've mined out of them. It could be, threats of never seeing their kids ever again. It could be threats of further parental alienation. Like, the power dynamic imbalance has nothing to do with what has been purported into the record about how these people have the idea to help anybody other than themselves. If they're not being helped themselves by exploiting, abducting, kidnapping, holding hostage, including but not limited to minors, then they're not happy. So, this interview, for anyone who's wondering, how was it that you're calling kids that are part of the Sea Org slaves? I mean, maybe you're exaggerating a little bit. Maybe Nicole Kidman has no idea and has nothing to do with it. Well, it's true. It's not her own problem. It's her and every last adult in that bucket that has financed this, that has donated money and taking a write-off from the IAS, that has gone to Debbie Cook's hotel as so-called publics and given money, knowing full well that there's kids being made to do this, what this kid just told us happened to her entire childhood. So, yet again, we end up in the same exact place. What in the literal hell are minors being made to do? And why is this still happening in this year 2023? Because there is more, and we will do reaction part 2 to this interview, because it is that important, because it is something that's been on the record forever. And apparently, people are still out there playing dumb that nobody knows anything and nobody knew. And let's just all go see Mission Impossible, because apparently it is a mission impossible in America to stop this insanity. Well, get prepared, America, because your mission is about to stop becoming very impossible when you are being now asked by the kids that you abuse to start typing excuses in a letter to explain yourselves. Commissioner of the IRS, every last shred of employee at the IRS. If you didn't know, now you know. If you haven't audited these hotels, now would be a good time to start calling in those audits. If you didn't care, now would be the time to care. If you didn't think it was that bad, now would be the time for you to stop playing dumb, because either you don't believe this little girl that just literally told you everything, or explain what in the literal hell. Thank you for watching, you guys. Please like, subscribe, and follow, because we are not done yet exposing and uncovering and showing people how there has been very good interviews, very good reports, very fact-based reporting done by Mark Bunker. Shout out to him. Go follow him. He's now a council member in Clearwater, and he's been fair game ad nauseum, and he's been harassed ad nauseum. He's been on the story for decades. And shout out to Staci for sitting there, holding space, showing every last reporter what they all could have been doing. I mean, how hard was this, you guys? Honestly, how hard? She asked the right questions. She asked the tough questions. She asked the dad. She asked the kid. I mean, literally, there's just no excuse. So yes, all of you that live in Tampa and Clearwater and all of that, why in the hell are these hotels still operating in your city in this year 2023? That would be a very good question to ask yourselves. If you are a citizen there subsidizing Clearwater Police, if you are a citizen there subscribing to the Tampa Bay Times, if you are a citizen there that passes by that Fort Harrison and sees that young adults in small bodies are being bussed around because they don't want you to see who is inside the hotel. That's why you never see them walking around anymore. That was another one of those crisis management moments that Debbie Cook literally put up when the Lisa McPherson thing was flapping. Wouldn't you know, you guys? In an effort to minimize the exposure of minors causing red flags, because, you know, before Lisa died, you guys, these people were running around. Everything was so free and okay. But every time these people are about to face a consequence, especially legal, you have never seen more devoted, more aware of their criminal activity that they need to hide than the executives that run that hotel. There is a whole wide-ranging conspiracy of them that all act together with impunity to completely and utterly avoid following what the law says. They know better. They go to their homie L. Ron Hubbard and they check the policy to see, what does L. Ron Hubbard say? I thank you for watching this, you guys, and I will see you very, very soon.